I stepped out of my house that Tuesday morning, coffee in hand, ready to head to work. That's when I saw it, two bright red SUVs parked directly across my driveway, blocking me in completely. The HOA Karen's sisters stood there smirking like they'd just won the lottery. "Excuse me," I called out, walking toward the two women who were clearly proud of their little stunt. "You're blocking my driveway." The taller one, a blonde woman in her 50s wearing a pink tracksuit, turned to me with the most condescending smile I'd seen in years. "Oh, we know exactly what we're doing, sweetie." Her sister, a brunette with the same entitled attitude, nodded enthusiastically. "This is what happens when you don't follow HOA rules, mister. Maybe next time you'll think twice before painting your mailbox the wrong color." I blinked. My mailbox. Forest green is not an approved color according to Section 4.2 of the HOA guidelines, Pink Tracksuit said, pulling out a thick binder. Approved colors are hunter green, sage green, or emerald green. Forest green is clearly a violation. I stared at these two women, wondering if this was some kind of joke. "You're blocking my driveway because my mailbox is the wrong shade of green?" "That's right," Brunette Karen said, crossing her arms. "And we're not moving until you repaint it. The HOA has standards and we intend to enforce them." "I'm Linda Patterson," Pink Tracksuit announced like she was introducing royalty. "And this is my sister Carol. We're the HOA Enforcement Committee." "The entire committee?" I asked. "We're very thorough," Carol said proudly. "We've been cleaning up this neighborhood for 2 years now. Every lawn violation, every unapproved decoration, every mailbox infraction, we handle it all." I looked at my watch. I had a department meeting in 30 minutes, and these two were treating this like some kind of power trip. "Look, ladies, I need to get to work. Can we discuss this later?" Linda laughed. "Work? What work? You leave every morning at 8:30 and come home at random times. You're probably unemployed and just pretending to have a job." "That's right," Carol chimed in. "We've been watching you. No regular schedule, no uniform, no company car. You're probably living off disability or something." The assumptions were piling up faster than I could process them. These women had apparently been surveilling me for months and had come to the conclusion that I was some kind of deadbeat. "We've dealt with your type before," Linda continued. "Think you can move into a nice neighborhood and not follow the rules? Well, not on our watch." "My type?" I asked, genuinely curious where this was going. "Troublemakers," Carol said matter-of-factly. "Your grass is always a little too long, your mailbox is the wrong color, and last week we saw you working on your truck in the driveway. Section 7.3 clearly states no automotive maintenance visible from the street." "I changed my oil," I said slowly. "Violation," Linda declared, making a note in her binder. "That's a $50 fine." "And the mailbox is another 50, Carol added. "You're fining me?" "The HOA has the authority to levy fines for violations," Linda said, showing me a page in her binder. "It's all here in black and white." I rubbed my temples. "Okay, let's say I agree to repaint my mailbox. Will you move your cars?" "Not just repaint," Carol said. "You need to submit a color sample for approval first. Then wait for committee review. Then if approved you can repaint. The whole process takes about 6 weeks." 6 weeks. "We're very thorough," Linda repeated. "We can't just have people painting their mailboxes willy-nilly. What kind of neighborhood would that be? A normal one?" I suggested. Both women gasped like I'd insulted their mothers. "Normal?" Linda scoffed. "Mr. What was your name again?" "Morrison. Jake Morrison." "Mr. Morrison," she said, writing it down. "Clearly you don't understand the importance of maintaining property values. Every violation, every shortcut, every good enough attitude brings down the entire neighborhood. That's why we're here," Carol said. "To educate people like you about proper community standards." "By blocking my driveway?" "Sometimes education requires consequences," Linda said primly. "You ignored our previous notices." "What notices?" "The ones we left on your door," Carol said. 3 of them over the past month." I thought back but couldn't remember any HOA notices. "I never saw any notices." "That's not our problem," Linda said. "We have a signed witness statement that they were delivered." "Witness statement?" "Carol witnessed me delivering them," Linda said proudly. "And I witnessed Linda delivering them," Carol added. The circular logic was making my head spin. "So you witnessed each other?" "Exactly," they said in unison. I looked at my watch again. 20 minutes until my meeting. "Look, I really need to get to work. Can we please continue this conversation later?" "What part of 'you're not going anywhere' Don't you understand? Linda asked. Our cars stay put until you comply with HOA regulations. This is harassment, I said. This is enforcement, Carol corrected. There's a difference. A big difference, Linda agreed. Harassment would be if we were doing this without cause. But you're clearly in violation of multiple HOA rules. So you're going to keep me prisoner in my own driveway? Prisoner? Carol laughed. You're free to leave through your backyard. Or maybe call a friend to pick you up. Though I suppose that would require having friends. The personal attacks were starting to grate on me. What's that supposed to mean? We've been watching this neighborhood for 2 years, Linda said. You never have visitors, never attend community events, never participate in neighborhood activities. You're basically a hermit. Maybe I value my privacy. Privacy is one thing, Carol said. Being antisocial is another. Part of living in a community is being part of the community. Says who? Says the HOA charter, Linda said, flipping through her binder. Section 12.1 encourages residents to participate in community building activities. Encourages, not requires, I pointed out. Well, maybe if you participated more, you'd understand why we have rules, Carol said. Maybe if your rules made sense, more people would participate, I shot back. Both women looked scandalized. Our rules make perfect sense, Linda said. They're designed to maintain property values and community standards. By dictating what color people can paint their mailboxes? Color coordination is important, Carol said seriously. It creates visual harmony. Visual harmony, I repeated. That's right, Linda said. When every mailbox is the approved shade of green, it creates a sense of order and pride in the neighborhood. And when someone breaks that harmony? It sends a message that rules don't matter, Carol said. That anyone can do anything they want. Before you know it, you've got pink mailboxes, purple houses, and people parking boats in their driveways. The horror, I said dryly. You joke, but we've seen it happen, Linda said. One violation leads to another, and before you know it, your property values have dropped 20%. Has that actually happened here? Well, no, Carol admitted. But that's because we're vigilant. We catch violations early and nip them in the bud. Like forest green mailboxes. Exactly, Linda said, missing the sarcasm entirely. I pulled out my phone to check the time. 15 minutes until my meeting. Look, I appreciate your dedication to the neighborhood, but I really need to get to work. What work? Carol asked again. You still haven't told us what you do. I work for the county, I said vaguely. Doing what? Linda pressed. Various things. That's not very specific, Carol said suspiciously. It's county business, I said. Oh please, Linda scoffed. You're probably a maintenance worker or something. Maybe a janitor at the courthouse. Nothing wrong with being a janitor, I said. Of course not, Carol said quickly. But let's be honest, you don't exactly look like executive material. I was wearing jeans and a polo shirt, my usual casual attire when I wasn't in uniform. What's executive material supposed to look like? Suit, tie, briefcase, Linda listed. Professional appearance. You look like you're going to mow lawns or something. Maybe I am, I said. See, Carol said to her sister. I told you he was probably doing yard work. That's why he has that truck. They'd been building an entire narrative about my life based on absolutely nothing. You two have quite the imagination. We're observant, Linda corrected. It's part of our job as HOA enforcement. Your job is to watch your neighbors? Our job is to maintain community standards, Carol said. That requires observation. Observation or surveillance? There's a difference, Linda said. Surveillance implies something secretive or underhanded. We're completely transparent about our activities. Transparent how? We announce our presence, Carol said. When we're doing neighborhood inspections, we wear our HOA badges. You have badges? Linda proudly showed me a laminated card hanging from a lanyard. Official HOA Enforcement Committee identification. Did you make that yourself? Carol made them, Linda said. She's very artistic. I looked at the badge, which was clearly made with a home printer and laminator. Very professional. Thank you, Carol said, missing the sarcasm again. Now, Linda said, getting back to business, about your mailbox situation. We need a firm commitment from you that you'll begin the correction process immediately. What exactly does that involve? First, you need to fill out a violation acknowledgement form, Carol said, pulling out a sheet of paper. This admits your guilt and accepts responsibility for the violation. I have to admit guilt? It's just a formality, Linda said. You clearly violated Section 4.2, so there's no point in denying it. What if I disagree with your interpretation of Section 4.2? Both women looked at me like I'd suggested we burn down the neighborhood. Disagree? Carol asked. How can you disagree with facts? Your mailbox is forest green, Linda said. Forest green is not on the approved color list. Therefore you're in violation. It's basic logic. Maybe the person who approved the color list made a mistake, I suggested. The color list was carefully researched and approved by the HOA board, Carol said. It wasn't arbitrary. Who's on the HOA board? Well, currently it's just us, Linda admitted. But we plan to expand once we find other residents who share our commitment to excellence. So you two are the entire HOA? We're the active members, Carol said. There are other residents who are technically members, but they don't participate. Maybe they don't participate because they don't agree with your methods. Maybe they don't participate because they're lazy, Linda countered. It's easier to complain than to actually get involved. Have you asked other residents what they think about your rules? We don't need to ask, Carol said. The rules are clearly laid out in the HOA charter. Who wrote the charter? The original developer, Linda said. Back in 1987. And you've never updated it? Why would we update perfection? Carol asked. I was starting to understand the scope of the problem. These two women had essentially appointed themselves as the neighborhood dictators, using a decades-old document that probably nobody had read since the Carter administration. Let me see this charter, I said. It's confidential, Linda said. Confidential? HOA documents are only available to members in good standing, Carol explained. Since you're currently in violation, you don't qualify. So I can't see the rules I'm supposedly breaking? You can see the relevant sections, Linda said. But the full charter is restricted. That seems convenient. It's policy, Carol said firmly. I looked at my watch. 10 minutes until my meeting. Okay, here's what's going to happen. You're going to move your cars and I'm going to go to work. When I get home tonight, we can discuss this like civilized adults. No, Linda said. We're not moving until you sign the acknowledgement form. And what happens if I don't sign it? Then we escalate, Carol said ominously. Escalate how? We report you to the county for code violations, Linda said. Your grass is probably half an inch too long, which violates county ordinances. Your truck has a small oil stain under it, which is an environmental violation. And I bet if we look hard enough, we'll find other issues. You're threatening to report me to the county? We're explaining the consequences of non-compliance, Carol said. It's entirely up to you which path you choose. I almost laughed. These two had no idea they were threatening to report me to myself. You think the county will take your complaints seriously? We have a very good relationship with county officials, Linda said proudly. We've filed numerous reports over the years. And what kind of response have you gotten? Well, they don't always take immediate action, Carol admitted. But we're persistent. Maybe they don't take action because your complaints are frivolous. Our complaints are legitimate, Linda said indignantly. We only report actual violations. Like oil stains and long grass? Exactly, Carol said. Those things matter. To who? To everyone who cares about property values, Linda said. To everyone who takes pride in their neighborhood. Have any of your neighbors actually complained about my oil stain or grass length? They don't need to complain, Carol said. We see the violations and take action. So your complaint on their behalf? We're protecting their interests, Linda said. Whether they realize it or not. How considerate of you. We think so, Carol said sincerely. I looked at my watch again. 5 minutes until my meeting. This is my final offer. Move your cars now and we'll discuss this tonight. Otherwise, I'm calling the police. Both women burst out laughing. The police? Linda giggled. For what? For blocking my driveway. That's not illegal, Carol said. We're parked on public property. My driveway is not public property. The street is public property, Linda said. And our cars are on the street. Blocking access to my driveway. That's a civil matter, not a criminal one, Carol said knowingly. The police can't do anything about civil disputes. Is that right? That's right, Linda said confidently. We've researched this. As long as we're not on your actual property, the police can't make us move. And even if they could, it would take hours for them to respond, Carol added. They're probably too busy with real crimes to worry about neighborhood disputes. You seem to know a lot about police procedures. We've had to call them a few times, Linda said. For various neighborhood issues. What kind of issues? Well, there was the Johnson family's teenager who was playing music too loud, Carol said. And the Martinez family's dog that barked too much. And Mrs. Chen's wind chimes that were too noisy. The police came for wind chimes? Noise ordinances are very specific, Linda said. After 10 p.m., any noise above a certain decibel level is a violation. And you measured the decibel level of wind chimes? We bought a professional sound meter, Carol said proudly. It's very accurate. I shook my head. You two are something else. We're dedicated, Linda said. That's the difference between us and everyone else. We actually care about maintaining standards. Even if it means harassing your neighbors? We don't harass anyone, Carol said. We enforce rules. There's a difference. A difference that nobody else seems to recognize. That's because most people are too selfish to see the bigger picture, Linda said. They only care about themselves, not the community. And you care about the community? Of course we do, Carol said. Everything we do is for the betterment of the neighborhood. Including blocking people's driveways? Especially blocking people's driveways, Linda said seriously. Sometimes you have to take a stand. Against forest green mailboxes? Against the principle of ignoring rules, Carol corrected. If we let one person slide, everyone will want to slide. And then what? Chaos. Exactly, Linda said. Property values plummet, good families move away, and before you know it, you're living in a slum. This is a slum? I asked, looking around at the well-maintained houses and manicured lawns. It could become one, Carol said. That's why we're vigilant. You're vigilant against imaginary threats. The threats aren't imaginary, Linda said. They're potential. We prevent problems before they start. Like mailbox color problems? Like all problems, Carol said. Maintenance issues, landscaping problems, parking violations, noise issues, we handle everything. Whether people want you to or not. Whether people understand the necessity or not, Linda corrected. Most people don't think beyond their own immediate needs. And you think beyond your immediate needs? We think about the long-term health of the community, Carol said. 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now. What kind of neighborhood do we want to live in? One where people mind their own business? I suggested. One where people take responsibility for their actions, Linda countered. Where rules mean something and standards are maintained. Your standards. Community standards, Carol said. Standards that were established long before we moved here. By people who are probably all dead now. By people who understood the importance of order and discipline, Linda said. Values that seem to be lost on your generation. My generation? Young people today, Carol said dismissively. No respect for authority, no understanding of community responsibility. I'm 45 years old. You're acting like a teenager, Linda said. Arguing with legitimate authority figures, refusing to accept responsibility for your actions. Legitimate authority figures? We're the duly elected HOA Enforcement Committee, Carol said proudly. Elected by who? By the HOA membership, Linda said. Which consists of who? Well, currently just us, Carol admitted. But we plan to hold elections once we expand membership. So you elected yourselves? We volunteered to serve, Linda said. Someone had to step up. And you just happened to volunteer for the most powerful positions? We volunteered for the most necessary positions, Carol corrected. Enforcement is the backbone of any organization. What about a president or treasurer? We handle those duties too, Linda said. I'm the enforcement coordinator and Carol is the compliance officer. Who's the president? We're co-presidents, Carol said. It's more efficient that way. And the treasurer? We don't collect dues yet, Linda said. But when we do, we'll handle the financial aspects. So you're everything? We're what the community needs, Carol said. Leaders who aren't afraid to make tough decisions. Like blocking driveways? Like enforcing standards, Linda said. Even when it's unpopular. Especially when it's unpopular, Carol added. Anyone can enforce rules when everyone agrees. It takes real leadership to enforce rules when people resist. Or maybe it takes common sense to know when rules are unreasonable. The rules aren't unreasonable, Linda said. They're comprehensive. There's a difference between comprehensive and ridiculous. What's ridiculous about wanting a nice neighborhood? Carol asked. Nothing. What's ridiculous is thinking that mailbox colors determine neighborhood quality. Everything determines neighborhood quality, Linda said. Every detail, every choice, every decision. It all adds up. To what? To the kind of place people want to live, Carol said. Or the kind of place they want to avoid. And you think people want to live in a neighborhood where the HOA blocks their driveways? We think people want to live in a neighborhood where rules are enforced fairly and consistently, Linda said. Where everyone is held to the same standards. Your standards. Community standards, Carol insisted. Standards that everyone agreed to when they moved here. I never agreed to any standards. You agreed when you bought your house, Linda said. It's all in the deed restrictions. Which nobody reads. Ignorance of the law is no excuse, Carol said. If you buy a house in an HOA community, you're bound by the HOA rules. Even if the HOA consists of 2 people who appointed themselves? Even if the HOA consists of 1 person, Linda said. As long as the proper legal framework is in place. And you think your legal framework is proper? We know it is, Carol said. We've consulted with legal experts. What legal experts? Well, we've read several books about HOA law, Linda said. And we've watched online seminars. Online seminars? There are excellent resources available for HOA board members, Carol said. We've educated ourselves thoroughly. By watching YouTube videos? By studying legitimate educational materials, Linda said defensively. We take our responsibilities seriously. Your self-appointed responsibilities. Our legally appointed responsibilities, Carol corrected. The HOA charter gives us the authority to enforce community standards. The charter that nobody else has seen? The charter that's available to any member in good standing, Linda said. Which you're not, due to your current violation status. So I'm guilty until proven innocent? You're in violation until you come into compliance, Carol said. There's a difference. A difference that only you 2 seem to understand. A difference that any reasonable person would understand, Linda said. If they took the time to learn the rules. Instead of just blindly following them? Instead of selfishly ignoring them, Carol said. Rules exist for a reason. And that reason is? To maintain order and protect everyone's interests, Linda said. To prevent chaos and ensure fairness. Fairness like blocking someone's driveway? Fairness like applying the same standards to everyone, Carol said. Rich or poor, old or young, popular or unpopular, everyone follows the same rules. Your rules? Community rules, Linda said firmly. Rules that were established through proper legal channels. 38 years ago. Good rules don't expire, Carol said. Truth is truth regardless of when it was established. And you 2 are the guardians of truth? We're the guardians of community standards, Linda said. Someone has to be. Why you? Because we're the only ones willing to do the job, Carol said. Everyone else just wants to enjoy the benefits of living in a nice neighborhood without taking responsibility for maintaining it. Maybe they have different ideas about what maintenance means. Maybe they're too lazy to do what's necessary, Linda said. It's easier to complain than to actually get involved. Have you asked them to get involved? We've tried, Carol said. We've sent notices about HOA meetings, but nobody ever shows up. Maybe they don't show up because they don't agree with your agenda. Maybe they don't show up because they don't care about the neighborhood, Linda said. As long as their own property is okay, they don't worry about anyone else. Or maybe they don't show up because they think you're both crazy. Both women looked genuinely shocked. Crazy? Carol asked. For caring about property values? For obsessing over mailbox colors, I said. For spying on your neighbors. For blocking driveways over imaginary violations. The violations aren't imaginary, Linda said indignantly. Your mailbox is clearly the wrong color. According to who? According to the approved color chart, Carol said, pulling out a laminated sheet. See? Hunter green, sage green, emerald green. No forest green. Who made this chart? The original HOA board, Linda said. Back in 1987. And you've never questioned whether it makes sense? Why would we question it? Carol asked. It's perfectly logical. It's perfectly arbitrary. It's perfectly designed to ensure visual harmony, Linda said. When everyone uses approved colors, the neighborhood looks cohesive and well-planned. And when someone uses forest green instead of hunter green? It disrupts the harmony, Carol said seriously. It sends a message that rules don't matter. It sends a message that people made a slightly different color choice. There's no such thing as a slightly different color choice, Linda said. There are approved colors and unapproved colors. Right and wrong. Compliant and non-compliant. Black and white. Exactly, Carol said. Life is much simpler when you have clear guidelines. Life is much more complicated than your guidelines suggest. Life is as complicated as you make it, Linda said. We've chosen to keep things simple and straightforward. By creating elaborate enforcement procedures for mailbox colors? By creating comprehensive standards that cover all aspects of community life, Carol said. Mailboxes, landscaping, parking, noise, maintenance, everything that affects neighborhood quality. And you too are the experts on all of these things? We're the people who care enough to learn about them, Linda said. We've studied HOA management extensively. By reading books and watching videos. By educating ourselves about best practices, Carol said. By researching successful HOA communities around the country. And what did you learn? That successful communities have strong enforcement, Linda said. That rules without consequences are just suggestions. That people will always push boundaries if you let them, Carol added. That's why you have to be firm from the beginning. Firm or inflexible? Firm, Linda said. Inflexible would be refusing to work with people who want to comply. And you work with people who want to comply? Of course, Carol said. We're very reasonable with residents who acknowledge their violations and take corrective action. But not with residents who question the violations? There's nothing to question, Linda said. Either you're in compliance or you're not. And if I disagree with your assessment? Then you're wrong, Carol said matter-of-factly. The rules are clear, the violations are obvious, and the corrective actions are straightforward. What if I got a second opinion? From who? Linda asked. From the county. The county doesn't handle HOA matters, Carol said. That's a civil issue, not a government issue. But you just threatened to report me to the county. For county code violations, Linda said. Which are separate from HOA violations. How convenient. It's not convenient, it's comprehensive, Carol said. We use every available tool to ensure compliance. Including blocking driveways? Including taking appropriate enforcement action, Linda said. This is appropriate enforcement action. According to who? According to the HOA enforcement guidelines, Carol said. Section 15.3 allows for escalated enforcement measures when initial compliance efforts fail. What initial compliance efforts? The notices we left on your door, Linda said. 3 separate notices over the past month. The notices I never saw. The notices we have witness statements confirming were delivered, Carol said. Your failure to respond constitutes non-compliance. What if I was out of town? Then you should have made arrangements for someone to monitor your property, Linda said. Absence doesn't excuse non-compliance. What if the notices blew away? Then you should have secured them properly, Carol said. It's your responsibility to receive and respond to HOA communications. Even if I never saw them? Especially if you never saw them, Linda said. That suggests you're not paying attention to your property maintenance responsibilities. Or that you're not delivering notices properly. We have a signed witness statement, Carol said, pulling out a piece of paper. Right here. Dated and witnessed. By each other. By duly appointed HOA representatives, Linda said. Our signatures are legally binding. According to who? According to HOA law, Carol said. Board members have the authority to witness and validate official documents. Board members who appointed themselves? Board members who were properly elected according to HOA charter provisions, Linda said. The fact that we ran unopposed doesn't invalidate our election. Nobody else ran because nobody else knew there was an election. We posted notices about the election, Carol said. It's not our fault that residents don't pay attention to HOA communications. Where did you post the notices? On the community bulletin board, Linda said. Where's the community bulletin board? In our garage, Carol said. We maintain it as a community service. In your garage? We converted part of our garage into a community meeting space, Linda said. It's very nice. And you posted election notices there? We posted them and sent email notifications to all residents, Carol said. What email notifications? We sent emails to everyone whose email address we had, Linda said. Which was who? Well, just us, Carol admitted. But we tried to get other email addresses. How? We went door to door asking for them, Linda said. Most people weren't home. Or they didn't answer the door. That's not our fault, Carol said. We made a good faith effort to communicate with the community. By knocking on doors once? By knocking on doors several times, Linda said. And leaving notices when people weren't home. What kind of notices? Requests for email addresses and phone numbers, Carol said. So we could keep residents informed about HOA activities. And how many people responded? Well, none, Linda admitted. But that doesn't mean we didn't try. Maybe people didn't respond because they didn't want to be involved. Maybe people didn't respond because they didn't understand the importance of community participation, Carol said. That's why we have to take leadership roles. Leadership roles that nobody asked you to take? Leadership roles that needed to be filled, Linda said. Nature abhors a vacuum. And you two were the vacuum fillers? We were the responsible citizens who stepped up when others wouldn't, Carol said. Someone had to do it. Did someone have to do it? Of course, Linda said. HOA communities require active management. Without leadership they fall apart. This community seems to be doing fine. This community is doing fine because we're managing it, Carol said. If we weren't here you'd see problems everywhere. What problems? Maintenance issues, landscaping problems, parking violations, Linda listed. All the things we prevent through proactive enforcement. I don't see any of those problems now. Because we prevent them, Carol said. Prevention is much more effective than reaction. Or maybe those problems don't exist. The problems always exist, Linda said. People are naturally lazy and selfish. Without rules and enforcement they'll let everything slide. Maybe people are naturally responsible and don't need micromanagement. Maybe people are naturally irresponsible and need clear guidance, Carol countered. That's why we have laws and regulations. And self-appointed enforcement committees? And dedicated volunteers who care about community standards, Linda said. We're not self-appointed. We're community-appointed. By a community that consists of yourselves. By a community that had the opportunity to participate but chose not to, Carol said. We can't force people to be involved. But you can force people to comply? We can encourage people to comply, Linda said. Strongly encourage them. By blocking their driveways? By using appropriate enforcement measures, Carol said. This is an appropriate enforcement measure. Says who? Says the HOA enforcement guidelines, Linda said. Section 15.3 is very clear about escalated enforcement procedures. I checked my watch one more time. I was officially late for my meeting. That's it. I'm calling the police. Go ahead, Carol laughed. We already told you they can't do anything about civil matters. We'll see about that, I said, pulling out my phone. You're wasting your time, Linda said smugly. But go ahead and waste it. We've got all day. I dialed the non-emergency number for the sheriff's department. Hi, this is Jake Morrison. I need a unit at 1247 Oak Street for a driveway blocking situation. Right away, Sheriff, the dispatcher said. About 5 minutes. I hung up and looked at the two women who were still smirking. See, Carol said. They probably told you they'd send someone when they get around to it. Could be hours. Actually, they said 5 minutes. Right? Linda said sarcastically. I'm sure they're dropping everything to rush over here for your driveway complaint. We'll see. Even if they do come, Carol said, they'll tell you it's a civil matter and suggest you call a lawyer. That's what they always say. You seem very confident about police procedures. We've dealt with them before, Linda said. They're basically useless for neighborhood disputes. Is that right? That's right, Carol said. They only care about real crimes, not community standards enforcement. True to their word, exactly 5 minutes later, a sheriff's department patrol car pulled up. Deputy Martinez got out, someone I'd worked with for over a decade. Morning, Sheriff, he said with a slight grin. What seems to be the problem here? The effect on Linda and Carol was immediate and dramatic. Their smug expressions evaporated as they processed what Deputy Martinez had just said. Sheriff. Linda squeaked. Did he just call you Sheriff? Carol asked, her voice climbing an octave. He did, I said calmly. Deputy Martinez, these two ladies have blocked my driveway and are refusing to move their vehicles. They seem to think the police can't do anything about it. Is that what they think? Deputy Martinez asked, pulling out his citation book. Well, let's see. Blocking a driveway is a traffic violation under County Ordinance 127.3. That's a $150 fine per vehicle. Wait, Linda said, her confidence cracking. You can't give us tickets. We're on public property. Ma'am, blocking access to a driveway is illegal regardless of where your vehicle is positioned, Deputy Martinez explained patiently. Would you like me to explain the relevant statutes? But we're HOA enforcement, Carol protested, waving her homemade badge. We're conducting official business. Deputy Martinez looked at the laminated card and tried not to smile. Ma'am, HOA enforcement doesn't give you the authority to violate traffic laws. In fact, I'm not sure this is even a legitimate HOA. Of course it's legitimate, Linda said indignantly. We're duly elected officials. Elected by who? I asked. By the HOA membership, Carol said, though she sounded less certain than before. Which consists of who? Deputy Martinez asked. Well, currently just us, Linda admitted. But, so you elected yourselves to enforce rules on your neighbors? Deputy Martinez said. That's interesting. We volunteered to serve the community, Carol said defensively. By harassing residents over mailbox colors? I asked. We don't harass anyone, Linda said, but her voice lacked its earlier conviction. What would you call blocking someone's driveway? Deputy Martinez asked. Enforcement action, Carol said weakly. I'd call it a traffic violation, Deputy Martinez said, continuing to write citations. 2 traffic violations actually. You can't give us tickets, Linda protested. We're conducting legitimate HOA business. Show me your incorporation papers, I said. Our what? Carol asked. Your legal incorporation documents. Your IRS determination letter. Your registered agent information. Any documentation that proves you're actually a legitimate HOA. Both women looked at each other nervously. We have the original charter, Linda said. From 1987? Yes. That was probably dissolved years ago for failure to file required documents, Deputy Martinez said. Most HOAs from that era didn't maintain proper legal standing. What does that mean? Carol asked, her voice getting smaller. It means you're probably just 2 neighbors with no legal authority harassing other neighbors, I said. Which could be considered criminal harassment under County Ordinance 89.2. Criminal harassment? Linda gasped. Repeated unwanted contact with intent to intimidate or coerce, Deputy Martinez recited. That's a misdemeanor punishable by up to 6 months in jail. We're not harassing anyone, Carol said desperately. We're just trying to maintain community standards. By blocking driveways, threatening to file false reports, and conducting surveillance on your neighbors, I said. What would you call that? Community service, Linda said, but she was clearly shaken. I'd call it stalking, Deputy Martinez said. Especially the surveillance part. Have you been watching Mr. Morrison's house? We observe the neighborhood for violations, Carol admitted. How often? Daily, Linda said. Sometimes twice daily. And you keep records of his activities? We document all violations, Carol said. Show me your documentation, I said. Linda hesitantly pulled out a thick notebook. This is our violation log. I flipped through it and couldn't believe what I was seeing. Page after page of detailed observations about my daily routine. What time I left, what time I came home, what I was wearing, who visited, what I did in my yard. It was a stalker's diary. Deputy Martinez, I said, handing him the notebook. Take a look at this. He whistled low. Ladies, this goes way beyond community standards. This is obsessive surveillance. We're talking potential stalking charges here. Stalking. Carol said, her face going pale. We're not stalking anyone. You've been documenting his daily activities for months, Deputy Martinez said. Recording his schedule, his visitors, his activities. In legal terms, that's stalking. We were just doing our job, Linda protested. What job? I asked. You're not employed by anyone. You appointed yourselves to positions that don't exist in an organization that probably isn't legal. The HOA is legal, Carol insisted, but she sounded less sure. Prove it, Deputy Martinez said. Show me current incorporation documents filed with the state. We don't have those, Linda admitted. Show me IRS determination letters proving tax-exempt status. We don't collect dues yet, Carol said. Show me registered agent documentation. We handle that ourselves, Linda said. Show me current insurance policies. Insurance? Carol asked. Every legitimate HOA carries liability insurance, I explained. In case they get sued for harassment or illegal enforcement actions. We don't have insurance, Linda admitted. Then you're not a legitimate HOA, Deputy Martinez said. You're just two neighbors playing pretend. We're not playing pretend, Carol protested. We're trying to maintain property values. By harassing your neighbors and violating traffic laws, I said. How's that working out for property values? We've kept this neighborhood clean and orderly, Linda said. You've terrorized your neighbors, Deputy Martinez corrected. I bet if we knocked on doors, we'd find plenty of people with complaints about your behavior. People love what we've done, Carol said, but she didn't sound convinced. Really? I said. Let's test that theory. Deputy Martinez, how about we go door to door and ask the neighbors what they think about the HOA enforcement activities? Great idea, Deputy Martinez said. I bet we'll get an earful. No, Linda said quickly. That's not necessary. Why not? I asked. If people support what you're doing, they'll be happy to tell us. We don't want to disturb the neighbors, Carol said. But you don't mind blocking their neighbor's driveway? That's different, Linda said weakly. How is it different? It's enforcement action, Carol said, but all the fight had gone out of her. It's harassment, Deputy Martinez said. And now that I know Mr. Morrison is the county sheriff, it's also interfering with a law enforcement officer's duties. Interfering with law enforcement? Linda gasped. We didn't know he was the sheriff. Because you never bothered to find out who you were harassing, I said. You just assumed I was some unemployed loser you could push around. We didn't assume anything, Carol protested. Really? You told me I was probably a janitor or maintenance worker. You said I was living off disability. You said I was unemployed and pretending to have a job. You were just making assumptions based on prejudice and ignorance, Deputy Martinez said. And those assumptions led you to harass a county sheriff. We're sorry, Linda said desperately. We didn't know. You're sorry you got caught, I said. You're not sorry for what you did. We are sorry, Carol insisted. We really are. Prove it, I said. Move your cars, apologize to every neighbor you've harassed, and disband your fake HOA. We can move the cars, Linda said quickly. But we can't disband the HOA. The neighborhood needs leadership. The neighborhood needs to be left alone, Deputy Martinez said. You two are the only problem this community has. That's not true, Carol protested. There are real issues that need addressing. Like what? I asked. Well, there's mailbox colors? Deputy Martinez suggested. Property maintenance standards, Linda said weakly. Whose property needs maintenance? I asked. Well, nobody's right now, Carol admitted. But that's because we've been vigilant. Or because there were never any problems to begin with, I said. There were problems, Linda insisted. Before we started our enforcement activities, there were lots of problems. Such as? Well, there was Mr. Peterson's fence that was 6 inches too tall, Carol said. 6 inches? Deputy Martinez asked. The HOA charter specifies that fences can't exceed 6 feet, Linda said. His was 6 feet 6 inches. And that was a problem? It violated the charter, Carol said. So you harassed him until he cut 6 inches off his fence? We educated him about compliance requirements, Linda said. How did you educate him? I asked. We left notices on his door, Carol said. And when he didn't respond, we escalated. How did you escalate? We blocked his driveway, Linda admitted. Just like you did to me? It was necessary enforcement action, Carol said. What happened? Deputy Martinez asked. He cut the fence, Linda said proudly. And how did he feel about that? I asked. He wasn't happy, Carol admitted. But he complied. Did he file a complaint? He threatened to, Linda said. But we explained that we were just doing our job. Your self-appointed job, I corrected. Our necessary job, Carol said, but she sounded defeated. Deputy Martinez, I said, I think we need to have a conversation with Mr. Peterson and some of the other neighbors. I have a feeling we're going to discover a pattern of harassment here. Good idea, Sheriff, Deputy Martinez said. We might be looking at multiple charges. Multiple charges? Linda gasped. Harassment, stalking, impersonating officials, traffic violations, I listed. It adds up quickly. We're not impersonating officials, Carol protested. You're claiming to be HOA enforcement officers, Deputy Martinez said. But you're not part of a legitimate HOA. That's impersonating officials. We never claimed to be government officials, Linda said. You claim to have legal authority you don't possess, I said. That's fraud. Fraud, Carol squeaked. Using false pretenses to coerce behavior, Deputy Martinez explained. Definitely fraud. We weren't trying to coerce anyone, Linda protested. You blocked my driveway to force compliance with rules you have no authority to enforce, I said. If that's not coercion, what is? We were just trying to maintain standards, Carol said desperately. Whose standards? I asked. Community standards, Linda said. According to who? According to the HOA charter, Carol said. The charter from a dissolved organization that you have no connection to, Deputy Martinez said. It's not dissolved, Linda protested. Prove it, I said. Show me current state filings. We don't have those, Carol admitted. Then it's dissolved, Deputy Martinez said. HOAs that don't maintain proper legal standing automatically dissolve. So we have no authority? Linda asked in a small voice. You never had authority, I said. You just convinced yourselves you did. But the neighborhood needs leadership, Carol said weakly. The neighborhood needs to be left alone, Deputy Martinez said. By people who don't understand the difference between leadership and harassment. We do understand the difference, Linda protested. No, you don't, I said. Leadership is about serving others. Harassment is about serving yourself. We were serving the community, Carol said. You were serving your own need to control others, Deputy Martinez said. There's a big difference. That's not true, Linda said, but she was crying now. It is true, I said gently. And deep down, you know it. The two women stood there in silence, their entire worldview crumbling around them. These weren't evil people, just misguided ones who had let a little bit of imaginary power go to their heads. Here's what's going to happen, I said. You're going to move your cars immediately. You're going to apologize to every neighbor you've harassed. You're going to stop all HOA enforcement activities. And you're going to stay away from my property unless you have a legitimate reason to be here. And if we don't? Carol asked quietly. Then you'll be arrested for harassment, stalking, and fraud, Deputy Martinez said. And I'll personally make sure the charges stick. We understand, Linda said, wiping her eyes. Do you? I asked. Because this pattern of behavior has to stop completely. No more surveillance, no more violation logs, no more blocking driveways, no more threatening to file false reports. We understand, Carol repeated. I hope so, I said. Because if I hear about you harassing anyone else in this neighborhood, I'll arrest you myself. You'd arrest us? Linda asked. In a heartbeat, I said. Harassment is a crime, and I don't tolerate criminals in my neighborhood. We're not criminals, Carol protested weakly. You are if you keep doing what you've been doing, Deputy Martinez said. The sheriff is being very generous by giving you a warning instead of arresting you right now. Very generous, I agreed. Most people who stalk and harass their neighbors end up in jail. We weren't stalking, Linda said. You documented my daily activities for months, I said. You recorded my schedule, my visitors, my clothing, my activities. What would you call that? Research, Carol said quietly. I'd call it obsessive surveillance, Deputy Martinez said. And a judge would call it stalking. We're sorry, Linda said again. We really are sorry. Then prove it, I said. Change your behavior completely. We will, Carol promised. I hope so, I said. For your sake. Deputy Martinez finished writing the citations and handed them over. 2 tickets for blocking a driveway. $150 each. You can pay online or contest them in court. We'll pay, Linda said quickly. Smart choice, Deputy Martinez said. Contesting traffic tickets when you're clearly guilty is expensive. Now move your cars, I said. I'm already late for work. The 2 women hurried to their vehicles like scalded cats. Within minutes, my driveway was clear and they were driving away, probably to lick their wounds and figure out what had just happened to their little empire. Thanks for backing me up, I told Deputy Martinez. No problem, Sheriff, he said. Those 2 are something else. I've never seen such detailed surveillance logs on a neighbor. It was pretty creepy, I agreed. They knew my schedule better than I did. You want me to follow up with the other neighbors? See if there are more complaints? Definitely, I said. I have a feeling we're going to find out that half the neighborhood has been terrorized by these 2. I'll start with this Mr. Peterson and his fence, Deputy Martinez said. 6 inches too tall? Really? Some people have too much time on their hands, I said. And too little common sense, he added. As Deputy Martinez drove away, I finally got in my truck and headed to work. I was 30 minutes late for my meeting, but at least I had a good story to tell. The drive to the county building gave me time to think about what had just happened. Those two women had convinced themselves they were community leaders, but they were really just bullies with delusions of grandeur. They'd probably been harassing neighbors for months, maybe years, all while telling themselves they were doing good work. It was a perfect example of how a little bit of imaginary authority can corrupt people who aren't equipped to handle it. They'd created an entire bureaucracy around mailbox colors and fence heights, complete with violation logs and enforcement procedures. It would have been funny if it wasn't so pathetic. When I got to the office, my deputy chief was waiting with a curious expression. "Sorry I'm late," I said. "I had a situation at home." "Everything okay?" "Just some neighbors who didn't know when to mind their own business," I said. "It's handled now. Anything I need to know about?" I thought about it for a moment. "You might want to have Martinez do a follow-up investigation. Sounds like there might be a pattern of harassment complaints in my neighborhood." "Harassment complaints?" "A couple of residents have been playing HOA enforcement officers," I explained. "Blocking driveways, conducting surveillance, threatening neighbors. The usual power trip stuff." "In your neighborhood?" "In my neighborhood," I confirmed. They had no idea who they were messing with. I bet that was a fun surprise for them. "They looked like they were going to faint when Martinez called me sheriff," I said. "Apparently they'd convinced themselves I was unemployed." "Unemployed?" "They've been watching my house for months, documenting my activities," I said. "They decided I was probably a janitor or living on disability." "Based on what?" "Based on the fact that I don't wear a uniform to work and I drive a pickup truck," I said. "Brilliant detective work." "Some people make assumptions," he said. "Some people should mind their own business," I said. "But don't worry, I think they got the message." The rest of the day was routine. Budget meetings, personnel reviews, the usual administrative work that comes with running a sheriff's department. But I couldn't stop thinking about the morning's events and wondering how many other neighbors had been victims of the HOA Karen Sisters enforcement campaign. When I got home that evening, I found a handwritten note taped to my front door. It was from Linda and Carol, a rambling apology that managed to be both contrite and self-justifying at the same time. They were sorry for blocking my driveway, sorry for not knowing I was the sheriff, sorry for any inconvenience they'd caused. But they also wanted me to know they'd only been trying to help the neighborhood and they hoped I'd understand their good intentions. Good intentions. The road to hell was paved with them, and these two had been laying asphalt for months. I was about to throw the note away when my neighbor across the street, Mrs. Henderson, came walking over with a huge smile on her face. "Jake," she called out. "I heard what happened this morning. The whole neighborhood's talking about it." "Word travels fast," I said. "Faster than you think," she said. "Those two have been terrorizing people for 2 years. Everyone's been afraid to say anything because they claim to have legal authority." "What kind of things were they doing?" "You name it," Mrs. Henderson said. "Threatening people over their grass length, measuring fence heights with rulers, documenting who had visitors and for how long. Mrs. Peterson down the street got a violation notice because her garden gnome was facing the wrong direction." "The wrong direction?" "According to their interpretation of the landscaping guidelines, decorative objects should face toward the street for optimal visual presentation," she said. "They made her turn her gnome around." "That's insane." "That's nothing," Mrs. Henderson said. "They told the Johnsons their Christmas lights were too bright. They measured the Martinez family's mailbox post with a ruler because they thought it was an inch too tall. They actually called the city on old Mr. Chin because his grass was supposedly half an inch too long." "Did the city respond?" "The inspector came out, measured the grass and told them it was perfectly fine," she said. "But those two kept insisting their measurements were more accurate." "What did the inspector say to that?" "He told them to find a hobby," Mrs. Henderson laughed. "But they just moved on to the next neighbor." "How many people have they harassed?" "Probably everyone on the street at some point," she said. "But nobody wanted to make waves because they claimed to be official HOA representatives." "Did anyone ever ask to see their credentials?" "A few people did," Mrs. Henderson said. "But they always had some excuse about confidential documents or restricted access or members in good standing. They made it sound so official that most people just went along with it." "Even when their demands were ridiculous?" "Especially when their demands were ridiculous," she said. "People figured that if the HOA was that specific about things, it must be legitimate." "And now?" Now everyone knows they were just two busybodies with too much time on their hands, Mrs. Henderson said. The whole neighborhood owes you a debt of gratitude. I was just trying to get to work, I said. You did more than that, she said. You showed everyone that bullies are just bullies, no matter what kind of authority they claim to have. Over the next few days, I learned more about the extent of Linda and Carol's reign of terror. Deputy Martinez conducted interviews with dozens of neighbors and documented a pattern of harassment that went back almost 3 years. The two women had appointed themselves as HOA enforcers shortly after moving to the neighborhood and had been systematically harassing residents ever since. Their methods were always the same. They'd claim to spot a violation of some obscure HOA rule, demand immediate compliance, and escalate their tactics if people resisted. The escalation usually involved blocking driveways, threatening to call authorities, or increasing the frequency of their surveillance activities. What made it worse was that most of their violations were completely fabricated. There was no legitimate HOA in the neighborhood, no enforceable rules, and certainly no authority for two random residents to appoint themselves as enforcers. But they'd been so convincing in their presentation, so confident in their authority, that most people had simply complied rather than fight. It was a perfect example of how bullies operate. They target people who seem vulnerable, use intimidation tactics to establish dominance, and rely on their victims' reluctance to escalate conflicts. Most people would rather repaint a mailbox or turn around a garden gnome than get into a prolonged dispute with aggressive neighbors. But bullies make one crucial mistake. They assume everyone is vulnerable to their tactics. They never consider the possibility that they might target someone who isn't intimidated by their bluster, someone who has the knowledge and authority to call their bluff. In this case, they'd picked the wrong neighbor to mess with. They'd assumed I was unemployed, powerless, and easily intimidated. Instead, I was the county sheriff with 25 years of experience dealing with people who thought they were above the law. The irony was perfect. Two women who spent their time threatening to report neighbors to county authorities had ended up harassing the county's chief law enforcement officer. It was like a criminal threatening to call the police on the police chief. But what struck me most about the whole situation wasn't the irony or the justice of it all. It was how easily good people can be intimidated by bullies who claim to have authority they don't actually possess. Linda and Carol had terrorized an entire neighborhood for 3 years using nothing but confidence, persistence, and official-sounding documents they'd created on their home computer. It made me think about all the other situations where people abuse imaginary authority to control others. How many HOA boards overstep their actual legal powers? How many neighborhood busybodies intimidate their neighbors with threats they can't actually carry out? How many people comply with unreasonable demands simply because someone claims to have the authority to make them? The answer, I realized, was probably a lot more than anyone wanted to admit. A week after the driveway incident, I ran into Linda at the grocery store. She looked embarrassed and tried to avoid eye contact, but I made a point of approaching her. "Linda," I said pleasantly, "how are you doing?" "Fine," she said quietly. "Just fine." "Good to hear," I said. "How's retirement from the HOA business treating you?" She looked up at me with a mixture of shame and defiance. "We were just trying to help the neighborhood." "I know you thought you were," I said. "That's what made it so dangerous." "Dangerous? The most dangerous people are often the ones who think they're doing good," I said. "They justify any behavior because they believe their cause is righteous." "We weren't dangerous," she protested. "We never hurt anyone." "You harassed dozens of your neighbors for years," I said. "You conducted illegal surveillance, made threats you couldn't carry out, and bullied people into compliance with rules that didn't exist. What would you call that?" She was quiet for a long moment. "We thought we were maintaining standards." "Whose standards?" "Community standards," she said automatically, then stopped. "Our standards, I guess." "Right," I said. "Your standards imposed on everyone else without their consent." "But the neighborhood looks better now," she said. "Property values are higher, everything is well maintained." "The neighborhood looked fine before you started your enforcement campaign," I said. "And it'll look fine after." "You don't understand," she said. "Without leadership, communities fall apart." "Without appropriate leadership," I corrected. "Leadership that's actually wanted and needed." "Someone has to take charge," she insisted. "Why?" Because someone has to." "That's not a reason," I said. "That's an assumption." She thought about that for a moment. "So what happens now? Who's going to maintain standards?" "The same people who were maintaining them before you arrived," I said. "The individual homeowners who take pride in their properties." "But what if someone doesn't maintain their property?" Then it's their property to not maintain, I said. As long as they're not violating actual laws or ordinances, it's none of your business. But property values? Will be fine, I said. Property values are determined by location, market conditions, and overall neighborhood quality. Not by whether mailboxes are hunter green or forest green. You really think we were wrong about everything? I think you were well-intentioned people who got carried away with imaginary authority, I said. It happens more often than you'd think. So what should we have done? Minded your own business, I said simply. Taken care of your own property, been good neighbors, and left everyone else alone. That seems passive. It seems respectful, I said, of other people's autonomy and property rights. She nodded slowly. I guess we got a little carried away. A little? I said with a smile. Okay, a lot carried away, she admitted. But we really did think we were helping. I believe you, I said. That's what made you so effective. People could tell you genuinely believed in what you were doing. Even if what we were doing was wrong? Especially if what you were doing was wrong, I said. Bullies who know they're bullies are easy to spot. Bullies who think they're heroes are much more dangerous. She was quiet for another long moment. Are we criminals? Not anymore, I said. As long as you stay retired from the HOA business. We're retired, she said quickly. Completely retired. Good, I said. Because the neighborhood is much more peaceful without your enforcement activities. People have been avoiding us, she said sadly. Ever since word got out about what happened. Can you blame them? I guess not, she said. We probably weren't as popular as we thought we were. Probably not, I agreed. Fear and respect look similar from the outside, but they feel very different from the inside. People were afraid of us? Terrified, I said. They just didn't show it because they thought you had legal authority over them. We never wanted to scare anyone. But you did, I said. Every time you blocked a driveway, every time you threatened to call authorities, every time you documented someone's activities without their permission. We were just doing our job. You were just bullying your neighbors, I corrected. There's a difference. She looked like she was about to cry. We messed up, didn't we? You did, I said gently. But you can still make it right. How? By apologizing to everyone you harassed, I said. Sincerely apologizing without trying to justify what you did. We already left apology notes. Notes that spend half their time explaining your good intentions, I said. That's not an apology, that's an excuse. What should we say? That you were wrong, that you had no authority to do what you did, and that you're sorry for the stress and inconvenience you caused, I said. No explanations, no justifications, no, but we meant well qualifiers. Just admit we were wrong? Just admit you were wrong, I confirmed. That's harder than it sounds. Most worthwhile things are, I said. I left her standing there in the cereal aisle, probably contemplating the ruins of her self-image as a community leader. It wasn't easy watching someone realize they'd been the villain in their own story, but it was necessary. 2 weeks later, I found another note on my door. This one was different, shorter, simpler, and much more genuine. Linda and Carol apologized for harassing me and other neighbors, admitted they'd had no legal authority for their actions, and promised to stay out of everyone else's business going forward. No excuses, no justifications, no explanations about their good intentions. Just a straightforward acknowledgement of wrongdoing and a commitment to do better. It was exactly what an apology should be. Over the following months, the neighborhood gradually returned to normal. People stopped worrying about whether their grass was exactly the right length or their mailboxes were precisely the approved shade of green. The Martinez family put their Christmas lights back up in November without fear of violation notices. Mrs. Henderson's garden gnome returned to its original orientation. Mr. Peterson raised his fence back to its original height. And Linda and Carol? They became model neighbors. They kept to themselves, maintained their own property impeccably, and never again tried to tell anyone else what to do. They'd learned the most important lesson any neighbor can learn. The best way to improve a community is to mind your own business and let other people mind theirs. As for me, I went back to my normal routine of leaving for work in the morning and coming home in the evening, secure in the knowledge that my driveway would remain unblocked and my mailbox color would remain unquestioned. Sometimes the best solution to a problem is the simplest one: standing up to bullies and calling their bluff. Most of the time, they're not nearly as powerful as they pretend to be. They're just people who've convinced themselves that their opinions matter more than everyone else's property rights. And sometimes, If you're really lucky, they turn out to be harassing the one person in the neighborhood who has the authority to arrest them for it. That's what you call poetic justice.